Hello everyone, today we're going to explore a mysterious and complex murder case that took place in Hong Kong in the early 20th century. The crime scene was inside a modern building, fully equipped with surveillance cameras and access controlled by keycards. It was the kind of secure residential complex that made its residents feel completely at ease. However, after a bizarre murder occurred right inside this seemingly safe environment, that sense of security quickly gave way to confusion and fear. The killer not only stole valuable belongings, but also brutally murdered the homeowner's wife. So how did he manage to bypass all the surveillance cameras? And what was his motive? The story begins at 9:39 a.m. on September 30th, 2003, when the fire department received an emergency call from a man. In a worried voice, he reported that his wife had fainted and urgently requested an ambulance. The address he gave was an apartment on the 19th floor of a residential building in the Saiwan district. When paramedics arrived at the scene, the man who made the call was already waiting outside the door, visibly anxious and in a hurry to lead them into the bedroom. Inside, a middle-aged woman lay motionless on the bed. There were marks on her neck indicating she had been strangled, and a bath towel was still wrapped around her neck. Her shirt had been pulled up to her chest, while her shorts had been dragged down to her knees, revealing her underwear. The medical team immediately checked her condition. They couldn't find a pulse, but her body wasn't completely cold yet. Without delay, they transferred her onto the ambulance and rushed her to the nearby Queen Mary Hospital. Throughout the ride, they continuously performed CPR, hoping to bring her back to life. But when they arrived at the hospital, all efforts had been in vain. At 10:08 a.m., the doctor officially pronounced her dead. The devastating news was then delivered to the husband, who was still waiting outside the emergency room. Later, the victim's body was transferred to the morgue for further investigation. Police also quickly began questioning the husband. His name was Leung Wing Chun, and the unfortunate victim was Lau Chiu Yin, 43 years old. The couple had been married for 18 years and had 2 children, a 16-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son. Lau Chiu Yin worked as an office employee at a printing company. She was a devout Buddhist and deeply devoted to her parents. Every week, she would bring her husband and children to visit her parents' home in Saiwan and stay for dinner. On weekends, she often spent time with them over tea, chatting and enjoying peaceful family moments. According to neighbors in Pine Tower City, the family lived in harmony. The couple loved each other dearly, and their children were well-behaved and respectful. Lau Chiu Yin was soft-spoken, polite, and always carried herself with grace. Every morning at 8 a.m., she would light incense at the door of her home, and there had never been any arguments or conflicts within the household. It was hard to imagine that a middle-aged woman living such a peaceful and happy life would become the victim of such a brutal murder. Could she have unknowingly offended someone? Or was it just a simple robbery gone wrong? To find out more, let's take a look at the testimony given by her husband, Leung Wing Chun. He explained that earlier that month, he had been slightly injured in a traffic accident and was on medical leave from work. With more time at home, he had taken up the habit of jogging in the mornings. On the day of the incident, he woke up around 6 a.m. to prepare breakfast for their 2 children, reminding them to eat and head off to school. By 8 a.m., he left the apartment to go jogging at a nearby park, while Lau Chiu Yin was still asleep. Before leaving, he told her he would bring breakfast back. At around 9:30 a.m., when Leung Wing Chun returned home and went into the bedroom to change, he found his wife lying on the bed, her clothes disheveled, and she was no longer breathing or showing any pulse. He immediately called emergency services. Upon further inspection of the apartment, Leung noticed that several drawers had been rummaged through. After checking more carefully, he realized that 6,000 Hong Kong dollars, a gold necklace, and a gold ring were missing. One more detail stood out to him. Every morning, usually around 9 a.m. before leaving for work, his wife had a habit of taking out the trash and disposing of it behind the staircase. But when he returned that day, the trash bin was completely empty. That led him to suspect that the intruder may have encountered her in that area, forced her back into the apartment, and then carried out the attack. The case was quickly transferred to the Major Crimes Unit for investigation. When police questioned the couple's two children, both confirmed that around 6:30 a.m., they had woken up to get ready for school. The younger son even opened his parents' bedroom door and saw both of them still asleep, so he didn't disturb them. This information suggested that the likely time of Lau Chiu-yin's murder was between 8:00 and 9:30 a.m., precisely the hour window during which Leung Wing-chun was out of the house. The killer's motive appeared to be robbery, and it was clear that he was intimately familiar with the family's daily routines. He knew that the husband went jogging in the morning, and he knew exactly when the children left for school. But to commit murder just to steal 6,000 Hong Kong dollars in cash, along with a gold necklace and a gold ring, that was an enormous risk for such a small reward. Could it be that the robbery was merely a distraction, an elaborate ruse designed to mislead the police and throw off the investigation? And what about the way Lau Chiu-yin's body was discovered, partially undressed? Was it a sign that the killer intended to assault her, or just another part of his twisted plan? Police reviewed the surveillance footage from the building, where Leung Wing-chun had lived for more than 20 years. Though the complex was old, the security system remained reliable. Residents needed a keycard to enter, and all common areas, including stairwells, were monitored by cameras. However, between 8:00 and 9:30 a.m., the suspected window of the crime, there was no footage of any suspicious individual. Could the killer have snuck into the building earlier and hidden somewhere while waiting for the right moment? Working on that theory, the police expanded their review, analyzing surveillance footage from the previous 12 hours leading up to the murder. Still, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. If no outsider had entered or exited during that time, then the most likely scenario was that the killer was someone who already lived in the building. Investigators began questioning every resident one by one, but after a thorough screening, all of them were eliminated as suspects. Once the autopsy was complete, forensic pathologists confirmed that Lau Chiu-yin had not been sexually assaulted. Marks around her neck indicated she had been strangled with an object, possibly a towel. Her cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation due to manual strangulation. By 3 p.m. that day, when the examination was conducted, the body was already fully stiff, and her rectal temperature had dropped to between 30.5 and 31 degrees Celsius. Typically, rigor mortis begins about 2 to 3 hours after death and becomes fully developed between 9 to 12 hours later. Rectal temperature also drops progressively over time. Based on these indicators and the ambient temperature at the scene, the forensic team estimated the time of death to be between 1 and 4 a.m. This estimate, however, drastically conflicted with the statements given by Leung Wing-chun and the children. To complicate matters further, the forensic report also revealed the presence of a sedative in Lau Chiu-yin's system. Since 1997, Leung Wing-chun had been a professional firefighter, well-trained and experienced in emergency response and resuscitation. Yet, on the day of the murder, his behavior raised significant red flags with the police. According to his statement, when he discovered his wife unresponsive, he initially called the police but no one answered, so he contacted emergency medical services instead. What struck investigators as odd was that, despite his years of experience, Leung did not attempt CPR on his wife. He explained that when he saw she wasn't breathing and had no pulse, he assumed it was too late and that any resuscitation would be futile. But here was the contradiction. Even though he had concluded she was already dead, he still called for an ambulance. Leung claimed he didn't want his children to see their mother in such an undignified state and become traumatized. That, he said, was why he called the ambulance. However, instead of staying by her side during her final moments, he waited outside for the emergency team to arrive. Even more curious was the fact that shortly after the incident, he quickly checked through the apartment to confirm what items had been stolen. This left police wondering, could a man who had just lost his wife truly remain that composed? On top of that, the crime scene was unusually tidy, far too orderly for a situation where someone had just discovered the brutal death of their spouse. When questioned by police, Leung remained calm and articulate, showing no signs of shock or confusion. It was as if he had already rehearsed everything he was going to say. Most notably, he volunteered a theory that the murder may have resulted from a failed sexual assault, as if trying to steer the investigation in a particular direction. Despite all these suspicious behaviors, the police had no concrete evidence to arrest him. So at 7:30 p.m. on September 30th, 2003, they brought him in for further questioning. As predicted, Leung's demeanor changed entirely. The man who had previously seemed cooperative now refused to answer any questions. Throughout the interrogation, he remained completely silent. As the investigation deepened, more concerning details about Leung Wing-chun began to emerge, one of the most important being related to insurance. Back in 1996, the victim, Lau Chiu-yin, had purchased a life insurance policy worth $90,000 USD, naming her husband, Leung Wing-chun, as the primary beneficiary. Even more suspiciously, just 2 months before her murder, Leung had signed a new accidental death insurance policy worth 500,000 Hong Kong dollars. The policy didn't explicitly name a beneficiary, but it contained a critical clause. If one spouse died, the other would receive the full payout. It didn't stop there. Just a few hours after Lau Chiu-yin was murdered, Leung Wing-chun called the insurance company to report his wife's death and requested the payout. This unusual urgency raised suspicions with both the insurance company and the police. Could a grieving husband really be thinking about money so soon after losing his wife? Although all of these details deepened police suspicions, they still lacked direct evidence to formally charge Leung Wing-chun. Furthermore, a statement from his younger son created a significant gap in the prosecution's timeline. The boy said that around 6 a.m. that morning, he had seen both of his parents asleep, which appeared to suggest that Leung hadn't done anything suspicious at that time. As a result, after 48 hours of detainment and questioning, the police were forced to release him on bail for $5,000. Following this, the investigative team continued their work, taking additional statements from the couple's 2 children. First, the younger son gave a detailed account of what had happened that morning. He said his mother had been complaining of elbow pain for the past 2 weeks and had even gone to the hospital for it. Wanting to check on her before heading to school, he entered the master bedroom and saw her lying under a blanket, turned toward the wall. Assuming she was still asleep, he left without disturbing her. However, this testimony could not definitively confirm her condition at that time. Meanwhile, the older daughter recalled something that happened the night before. She remembered her mother complaining about arm pain and saying she needed to take some medicine. Her father, Leung Wing-chun, told her the old medication wasn't effective and handed her 4 new pills. When her mother questioned why she needed to take so many, Leung insisted it was the necessary dosage. After watching TV for a while, Lau Chiu-yin complained that the medicine was too strong, making her feel dizzy. She then went to bed. A short while later, Leung followed her into the room. The police later asked the 2 children why they hadn't reported this information earlier. The younger son explained that on the day the body was discovered, Leung had called him and said, "Just answer the police if they ask anything, but if you don't know something, don't say anything. Don't tell them about the sleeping pills I gave your mom. If you do, it'll ruin your father." However, after returning home that day, the 2 children spoke to each other and, after careful consideration, decided they had to tell the truth. When the truth could no longer be avoided, Leung Wing-chun finally admitted that he was the one who gave his wife the pills. He explained that he had taken them from the emergency station and didn't want anyone to find out because it might affect his job. But this reason clearly wasn't acceptable. By this point in the investigation, the case had begun to take a clearer, more coherent shape. To claim the $1.2 million insurance payout, Leung Wing-chun tricked his wife into taking sleeping pills. Once she fell into a deep sleep, he strangled her to death. Then, taking advantage of the time when the children were away at school, he staged the scene to look like a break-in and robbery and went out for a jog to create an alibi. But Lau Chiu-yin was still his legal wife. After 18 years of marriage, they had a son and a daughter together. Could this man, seen by others as a model husband, really abandon all emotional ties and send his wife to her death for the sake of an insurance payout? If so, what kind of desperation could have driven him to need that money so badly? And if not, then what was his true motive? On October 7th, exactly 7 days after Lao Chu-yin's death, her younger sister came to the couple's home to collect her sister's personal belongings. Seeing those familiar items brought her deep sorrow, but among them was a letter that immediately caught her attention. When she opened it, her sorrow turned to rage. It was a breakup letter, signed by Ah Chun, written at the end of 2002, and addressed to a woman named Xu Ying. In the letter, Ah Chun complained that Xu Ying was too greedy and only cared about money. He wrote that his love for her had even surpassed what he once felt for his first love. He expressed regret that he couldn't marry Xu Ying and hoped that in the next life, fate would bring them together again. From the content of the letter, it was clear that this passionate Ah Chun was none other than Lung Wing Chun. It turned out that Lao Chu-yin had not only endured physical pain, but had also suffered silently from her husband's betrayal. And that wasn't all. Alongside the love letter were 2 other letters written by Lao Chu-yin to a monk named Master. The first letter was dated 2003, the year she discovered her husband's affair. She expressed how deeply devastated she was, unable to believe what she had found out, especially because she had always believed Lung Wing Chun to be a good and faithful man. The second letter was written on September 28, 2003, just 2 days before her murder. In this letter, Lao Chu-yin didn't mention her husband's affair. Instead, she blamed herself for the financial losses suffered by her husband's family during the 1998 economic crisis. After returning home and discussing it with her family, Lao Chu-yin's younger sister handed these important letters over to the police. Investigators immediately took notice of one particular detail. Leung Wing Chun had once written that his lover was very greedy. This raised a chilling question. Did he murder his wife just to claim the insurance money for her? Through further investigation, it was revealed that in 2002, while visiting a massage parlor in Shenzhen, Leung Wing Chun had met a young woman named Kong Shu Ying. The two quickly developed an affair, and Leung began traveling to Shenzhen more and more frequently. Lao Chu-yin eventually grew suspicious, but wanting to preserve her family, she chose to stay silent. Shockingly, even after the murder, Leung Wing Chun had not cut ties with Kong Shu Ying. On April 17, 2004, the police went to Leung Wing Chun's house to ask for Kong Shu Ying's address, only to discover that she was actually staying there. Despite having supposedly broken up, it appeared Leung had convinced her to stay, and the affair was still ongoing. Police immediately took Kong Shu Ying in for questioning. At the time, she was only 20 years old and had very long hair. Initially, she denied having any romantic relationship with Leung Wing Chun. But soon after, she admitted that they met weekly in Shenzhen and occasionally went on trips together. Just 2 weeks before the murder, they had taken a 3-day trip to Zhuhai. On the very first day, their tour bus was involved in an accident. Kong Shu Ying suffered minor scratches on her hand, while Leung Wing Chun injured his head and arm, but ended up receiving a 3,000 yuan insurance payout. Police began to suspect that this accident may have planted the idea in Leung Wing Chun's mind to kill his wife and profit from the insurance. 10 days after Kong Shu Ying's interrogation, Lao Chu-yin's younger sister, along with a friend, spotted Leung Wing Chun strolling hand in hand with his mistress in Tung Lo Wan. Furious, she confronted him, accusing him of openly flaunting a new romance just months after his wife's death. Leung Wing Chun, completely unfazed, responded calmly, "It's been half a year already. I'm feeling down. It's normal for me to be with another woman." And with that, he and Kong Shu Ying turned and walked away, ignoring the disgusted stares of the people around them. The police believed the theory about Leung Wing Chun's romantic relationship was close to the truth. But to convict him, they needed more concrete evidence. For an entire year after the murder, investigators meticulously combed the crime scene for the smallest trace. They divided the area into a grid of 1,000 squares and collected every possible piece of evidence, from clothing fibers to skin cells. Their goal was to prove that no one else had entered the bedroom. If successful, they could rule out the possibility of a robbery homicide. But this kind of microscopic evidence was far harder to uncover than obvious physical signs. Eventually, the police found no indication that anyone else had entered the home. Evidence from the bedroom confirmed that only Leung Wing-chun and his wife were present at the time of the murder. More importantly, skin cells from Leung's palm were found on a towel near the victim's neck, and fibers from his clothing were discovered on Lao Chu-yin's pajamas. These details proved direct physical contact during the act of strangulation. Notably, while the victim's clothes appeared disturbed, her shirt pulled up to her chest, her pants pushed down to her knees, there were no clear signs of sexual assault, suggesting the scene had been staged to mislead the investigation. Once enough evidence was gathered on September 20th, 2004, the police officially arrested Leung Wing-chun and charged him with murder. In court, he adamantly denied all charges. When questioned about why he failed to perform CPR on his wife, despite having first aid training, he claimed he was too panicked at the time and forgot his training. He also insisted he didn't know how his wife had died and admitted that they were the only two people in the bedroom that night. Regarding the medication, he stated she had taken it herself and that he hadn't given it to her. As for his relationship with Kong Siu-ying, he argued it was purely physical and claimed he never intended to marry her. After 7 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict. The judge sentenced Leung Wing-chun to life in prison. This case stands as a grim reminder of the devastating power of greed and betrayal, forces capable of driving a person to unthinkable crimes. You reap what you sow. No sin remains hidden forever. When morality is cast aside for selfish desires, the cost is immense. Justice may arrive late, but it never forgets.